Okay, time for a look at the international papers with Deepti Laurent, who's back in the studio with me. Deepti, we're going to start with that horrific suicide bombing on a Kurdish wedding party in Turkey over the weekend.
That's right, Rochelle. The Wall Street Journal is reporting this on its front page this morning with a very anguishing photo. It was a suicide bombing in a mainly Kurdish neighborhood in the province of Gaziantep. Dozens of people were killed at the hands of a child bomber, most likely sent in by the Islamic State group. That's what the Turkish newspaper Hurriyet Daily reports on its front page. It quotes President Erdogan as saying that he, of course, condemned the attack in which the bride and groom survived but were injured.
Well, the international press, of course, has also reacted to the government's change in policy in Syria.
Let's look at the New York
On Syria, sorry.
That's right. Let's look at the New York Times article on that, Rochelle, which says that Turkey basically finds itself up against three enemies in the war in Syria. First of all, the Islamic State group, Bashar al-Assad himself, and Kurdish rebels. Now, Saturday's attack shows just how these enemies have sort of overlapped in Turkey, and this is possibly pushing President Erdogan to change Turkey's policy on Syria, with a focus now on keeping Assad in power, at least for the time being.
Okay, well, moving on now to the Rio Games. The press, of course, reflecting on the legacy of that Olympics as the closing ceremony wrapped up last night.
The end of the party, that's what Estado da São Paulo says, a Brazilian newspaper, on its front page, as South America's first ever Olympic Games wrapped up. For The Guardian, the rings leave Rio rustier but brighter. But the real word in the press this morning is relief, at least according to the Washington Post, which says that the Games ended in relief for Brazilians. It was a much-needed distraction over 2.5 weeks from the country's economic and political problems. But it wasn't all shiny fun and games. The Post reports that for some, the Games were unpopular and even infuriating, which sort of served to highlight the social inequalities in Brazil. The less unfortunate were often, I quote, bulldozed out of the way or priced out of events, and many people in the favelas were indeed evicted to pave way for expensive Olympic game projects.
The haves and the have-nots. Well, the United States, it pains me to say, topped the medal tally with an impressive series of victories across different sports, dominating as usual. And according to the China Daily, China could draw some lessons from this.
I think we could all draw lessons from their very impressive victories at the Olympics. But this article from the China Daily looks at how China, which didn't fare so well in this edition of the Olympic Games, could draw
third on the.
Not bad.
It's nothing to
not bad, but compared to the U.S., it wasn't China's best Olympics. And this article looks at perhaps why that was the case. The bottom line is that a love of sports, any sport, is bred from a very young age in the U.S., and they sort of embrace it. They encourage children to adopt sports from a young age. Unlike in China, sports culture is everywhere in the U.S., and many American students even choose their college based on sports. And this love of sports is something that Chinese students could also aspire to as well. Often, I quote, dismissed as a subject that's not tied to a college entrance examination that assesses mastery of knowledge. For this writer, sports provide skills that will be used in later life. By focusing on test-driven skills, Chinese parents, I quote, cannot prepare their children for other races in life.
Well, come on, they can't complain. Third on the medal table, Australia, traditionally a strong sporting country.
Australia,
we were 10th. Okay, we were 10th. And now, so I just think, China, be happy with your bronze medal, please.
We're never happy with what we have.
Now, the US is preparing for another race, the presidential race that could see Donald Trump flip-flop on key issues.
The Washington Post is reporting this, Rochelle, that Trump is, quote, seriously considering changing his tune on immigration. He, of course, famously called Mexican immigrants rapists and criminals and promised to deport all undocumented migrants. But after a meeting on the weekend with Hispanic advisors, he seemed to change direction away from deportation and possibly towards legalization, although this has neither been confirmed nor denied by Trump's campaign. But it could signal a softening in the Republican candidate's stance on immigration.
Okay, well, let's end very quickly with a rather dramatic National Day rally for the Singaporean Prime Minister yesterday.
Very dramatic indeed. Lee Hsien-loong, the Singaporean Prime Minister, collapsed mid-speech at a national rally last night due to heat exhaustion. It appears the mood was somber, the Straits Times reports on its front page. But in an effort that could rival an Olympian, the Prime Minister came back 20 minutes later to a standing ovation. He finished his speech, delivered in Malay, Mandarin and English, which I guess is enough to make anyone sweat a little bit.
Okay, Deepti, thanks very much for that. That was the press review with Deepti Laurent. Stay with us here on France 24, live from Paris, back in just a few minutes.